First off, my name is Brad Davis. I'm the general manager of the cannabis division of Acorn Paper. Quick promotional plug, we specialize in packaging, logistical supply solutions, regulatory compliance consultation, and brand marketing for the entire cannabis supply chain from seed to sale. That's all I'll say about me, because this is why you are here. We're very fortunate today to have a very diverse panel, but one that is going to be, I think, wrapping up everything that you've heard over the last couple of days through the forum, where we've been very medicinal, and health focused. We're now transitioning into information on how cannabis is impacting those of us and the consumers that are focused on a healthy, wellness-focused lifestyle, where cannabis plays a part of that. From everything from exercise and massage to food to parties. And I have asked, I'll introduce each panelist, and then I've asked each of them to just give 1 to 2 minutes. Sorry, Anna. See, I said we've got another one coming, and sorry, there was an issue on timing.
Okay. Hi.
That's Anna. We'll start here with, we've got Jackie Rocco, who is with the West Hollywood City Council. Next is Anna Duckworth, who is the editor-in-chief of Miss Grass, a digital magazine. And are y'all printing now as well? Or?
No, so we are an online magazine and marketplace.
Right, and marketplace. Next to Anna, we have Dan Bronstein, who is a founder of GrassFed, an events and marketing, events and catering company as well. Dan, would you say? Yes.
Events company.
Cool.
Cannabis events company.
Super. Next to Dan, I have Aaron Ramirez. Aaron is the founder of Bodywork by Aaron, massage therapy, and a manufacturer as well, I just learned. And then on the end is Rob Rosenheck. Many of y'all may have his product sitting in your purse right now. Rob is founder and CEO of Lord Jones. And just from an industry standpoint, some of the most beautiful packaging out there, sir. So congratulations. I'm asking each of them to just first give you a 1 to 2 minute overview of their company and how they are really tying into a healthy wellness lifestyle, and which was the biggest challenge for Jackie when I'm like, give an overview of how you contribute to a healthy lifestyle of being on the City Council of WeHo, but you actually have some good rationale. So I will let you start, Jackie.
Good afternoon. I'm actually in the Economic Development Department for the City of West Hollywood. And yeah, when Brad asked me to be part of this panel, I'm like, I don't know how I fit into this, panel of distinguished guests. But the City of West Hollywood has had a long history of cannabis because, during the HIV/AIDS situation in the city, 15, 20 years ago, the city approved medical dispensaries. So we've had a long history with medical cannabis. And when recreational use was approved, it was a logical extension for our city. We are a destination city where, nighttime entertainment and just lots of fun is part of our DNA. So for us, when we had the opportunity to enact a new ordinance to allow for cannabis regulation, this was really exciting for us. And the one thing that is a little bit different than what other cities are doing is that we will be allowing consumption lounges in our city. And for us, that was really important. So we're really proud of the work that we put into that ordinance, and have been really excited to see all the applicants that have submitted applications for those consumption lounges, because as you know, it's one thing to say that the product is legal and then you can't consume it legally anywhere. So what is the point of this? Or, it just really makes it challenging. So for us as a city, it was really important to acknowledge that component of it, that we wanted to welcome cannabis consumption in our city and to create the kinds of spaces where people can come and legally and safely consume the product. So, just stay tuned, and probably by this time next year, we're hoping we will have several consumption lounges operational in our city, and we invite all of you to come and visit and enjoy cannabis.
Thank
We
you.
love that.
Thank you
Anna?
for that. We're so excited. My name is Anna Duckworth. I'm the co-founder and editor-in-chief of Miss Grass, which is an online magazine and curated marketplace for women and cannabis with sort of a broader wellness mandate. So our marketplace at the moment consists of CBD products, all derived from hemp, so legal across the country, as well as accessories, the kind of accessories that you might leave out when your in-laws visit. In terms of how...
For them or for you?
For them. In terms of how Miss Grass sort of fits into the wellness vertical, so obviously we're targeted toward women, reason being that women have been a grossly overlooked consumer demographic by the cannabis industry for as long as it's been alive, which isn't to say that women haven't been consuming cannabis all of this time. It's just to say that none of the marketing, branding, or literature has been packaged in such a way that she's made to feel comfortable with her consumption and lifestyle. And so we are working more broadly to shift the narrative around cannabis as it relates to women, build a roadmap for that conscious cannabis consumer, which extends far beyond sort of elevating the plant for the female demographic and well into what it means to be a conscious cannabis consumer as it relates to the war on drugs, to prohibition, to companies that are invested in social equity programs, companies that share our values and ethos in creating products that give back, that look at how we can build in social corporate responsibility and remediation.
Beautiful, thank you. Dan?
Hi there. My name is Dan. I'm the founder of Grassfed. Grassfed is a cannabis-themed events company. We host both pop-up events and private events in California and Nevada. We started as an infused dinner party company and then expanded to bigger standing social events. All of our events are smoke-free, so we are the first and only smoke-free cannabis-themed events company. And for us, it's a big deal, not only because of the health and flavor issue that we like to vape our cannabis rather than smoke it, but also we believe that smoking is one of the biggest hurdles to make cannabis mainstream. Currently, we host 3 different pop-ups in Los Angeles. The first one is Inner Space, is basically an event series around immersive technology, cannabis, and art. The second one is Marijuana Madness, which is a live jazz and burlesque show telling the true story of cannabis prohibition in the jazz era. And we are planning actually the second part to be dedicated to the psychedelic era, the 60s and 70s. And then our third event series is Taste Buds, which is kind of similar to our initial dinner parties that we threw, more focused on aroma and food. Other than that, we facilitate private events, whether it's our signature vape bar for weddings and corporate events, as well as we are producing and facilitating events for cannabis brands as well. Again, one of our main, I think, advantages is offering this smoke-free environment. So thank you for having me.
Awesome, of course, thank you.
Hi, I'm Aaron Ramirez. Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. I am a massage therapist. I've been doing this for 11 years now. I own Bodywork by Aaron, and I work with a range of clients, anywhere from office workers, professional athletes, just your regular person, house mom, or your I forgot what I was going to say. But anyways, I also incorporate CBD that my wife manufactures, is our CBD oil, and we also use cream. And so I incorporate this to help my clients get through their daily work or their daily life by bringing inflammation down, joint pain, which a lot of us suffer from on a daily life because we're always confined to staying in a specific space. So I travel to people's homes and provide my service, and that is me. Thank you for having me.
Cool. Thank you, Aaron.
My name's Rob, and I am one of the founders of Lord Jones, and we make cannabis-infused products and CBD-infused products, and we have operations in California and Colorado. And we always saw cannabis as a wellness product, and we founded a medical marijuana collective several years ago, and we had patients that had everything from aches and pains and anxiety to autoimmune disease to cancer and AIDS to people who are managing end-of-life pain management. So, you know, for us, cannabis is something that's been used for thousands of years around the world. It was an ancient Chinese herbal medicine. It proliferated around the world. The United States was founded on cannabis. When the settlers came here from Europe, they all grew hemp and used it as fibers and for rope and textiles. And across the country in the 1800s, if you had aches or pains or menstrual cramps or migraine headaches or something that you didn't know what it was and you couldn't access a doctor, you'd go to your pharmacy and you would buy a cannabis tincture. And it wasn't until 1937 that cannabis was prohibited. And then in 1996, California legalized medical marijuana. So for the majority of our history, and for thousands of years of human history, cannabis was and is a wellness product.
Excellent, excellent. I think they've all of the panelists have really answered, in essence, my first question that I wanted to pose to the panel, and that was, you know, how their company is contributing to the development of and the use of cannabis as being part of a daily healthy lifestyle. I think you heard an overview in each one of their introductions of how what they are doing contributes to that. I just want to say, does anyone have anything extra you'd like to add to really? And I think of myself, you know, yoga 3 times a week, work out a couple of times a week if I'm lucky, but the wellness aspect of the use of cannabis after or before a workout for me is like extremely important. So I'm curious as to if you have anything else to add as to, you know, what your business is doing that is really expanding the use of cannabis as part of that lifestyle, not as a result of that lifestyle. There is a difference.
Yeah, I'll jump in here. As I'm sure many of you, if not all of you in the room know, the cannabis industry is decidedly unregulated, and CBD specifically is very unregulated. So what we have right now is an incredibly saturated market in which every major brand or non-existent brand that's up and coming is trying to hitch their wagon to the CBD star. And what we've found is that the consumer is incredibly vulnerable in this moment. And so while, you know, I think a large percentage of the population right now is feeling, frankly, disillusioned by pharma and otherwise wants to pursue and design their own sort of regimes and practices and rituals around self-care, we also need to make sure that they are equipped with information so that they are using products that are safe, that are ethically sourced, that are socially responsible, and that are effective. And so that's really what we're doubling down on at Miss Grass is doing that legwork for the consumer who doesn't have the foundation to be able to vet the products, to understand the verbiage around the products, to decipher between hemp seed oil and CBD, and all of those things. So I think that's a really, really important part that everybody on this panel in this room, if you work in cannabis, recognizes as our responsibility.
Just a quick follow-up on that, Anna. Do you intentionally have your bloggers and contributors write about and inform, let's say, on how you utilize cannabis from a self-care standpoint? And what do you mean when you say self-care?
It's a double-barreled question. So yes,
yes, it is.
Of course, that's the mandate of Ms. Grass, is to equip our consumers with this information. On our website, you'll find everything from, what the beauty industry's responsibility is right now to move the needle around the conversation as it relates to prohibition and the systemic racism in this industry, to why we say cannabis and not marijuana, to what to do when you're paranoid, to how to incorporate cannabis or CBD into your self-care or fitness regime, to what to do when you have period cramps or want to enhance your sex life. So we really run the gamut on that. And then in terms of how I define self-care, I define it very broadly. I think self-care starts with self-love. I mean, I sound like an absolute cliche, but just be thoughtful and listen to your body and listen to your heart. And I think that I view cannabis consumption in social settings to unwind at the end of the day as an alternative to a glass of wine very much as part of your self-care. So whether you're applying serums or topicals in the case of Lord Jones, or gummies in the case of Lord Jones, or you are smoking a joint, all of this I see as under that umbrella.
Awesome. Yeah.
So just to continue, because you said smoking a joint, and I can tell you Grassfed believes in terms of smoking and why it's so important to eliminate smoking at the end of the day, because first, we all know that smoking has a negative stigma. Smoking cannabis or smoking tobacco, or doesn't matter if you smoke lettuce, it's still harmful for you. So that's first. And second, there are many non-consumers or consumers that find smoking very irritating and don't like to get into a hot box environment, and are threatened by that and discouraged to participate in cannabis events that contain smoke. And that's why we're trying to change this, first the stigma, by offering a clean environment. And for me, and I used to be a smoker. I smoked for 13 years, and vaping and edibles as well changed my life when it came to cannabis as a wellness tool. When we say wellness and medical, I don't think you can combine smoking with wellness together. It just doesn't make any sense to me. And that's why I always prefer to go on the more healthier alternatives. Again, edibles, tinctures, vaporizers, patches. There's so many ways to consume cannabis today that I think smoking, you should smoke a joint once in a long while, for sure. It's still a very social thing to do, and I recognize it. But on a day-to-day use, if we're talking about wellness and being healthier, smoke should be out of the equation, in my belief.
For myself, as a healer and as a personal trainer, I try to really make my clients understand that CBD makes you whole. It makes your cells whole. It protects you. And so for them to understand that is really important. And to take it into their family, to teach their teenagers to apply to their achy muscles, to their groin muscles, or kids that just are not developing right, through connective nerves. So by using a topical or a tincture, it allows that connection to happen in a more holistic and spiritual way. So that's how I feel it can definitely change the industry or the outlook of how to consume or use cannabis and for everyone from elderly to newborns. So that's my perspective.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Dan, anything to add?
Well, one of our brand's missions is to normalize cannabis and to elevate it as a category. So we focus on introducing cannabis through non-traditional cannabis channels. So we have collaborated with Equinox to incorporate our cannabis products in working out and wellness. We have collaborated with the Icelandic rock band Sigur Rós, and we produced the first public cannabis performance experience where everybody was high. We just launched on Sephora this week, and we're the first and only CBD brand on the Sephora platform. So we're constantly trying to find ways to put CBD and cannabis into very traditional, mainstream channels and get away from all of the stereotypes that have been created around cannabis since its prohibition.
Rob, I'll ask a follow-up question to that because it leads into the next point I was wanting the entire panel to discuss, and that is kind of, how do you see your individual industries and businesses growing over the next several years? What strategies do you see taking? Oh my gosh, Sephora, and I'm going to have to talk to the general manager at Equinox Hollywood because I've not seen your product in Equinox Hollywood yet, so I'm loving to hear that. But what a unique combination for your brand and a very well-known health club brand that is out there. So I'm hearing you are taking a traditional, if you will, a non-traditional retail distribution model. Do you see your business growing into the CVS's of the world?
Eventually, we want to make these products available to everyone.
Other ways, just to open it up to the entire panel, how do you see your industry, your product, your business growing from a strategic standpoint? What avenues you're going to have to take to stay in the healthy lifestyle category?
I'd like to add that from a regulatory perspective in terms of local government, I think it's really critical for local government to really be part of this process, for this to really be fully mainstream. We have to have the kinds of regulations locally that allow for these products to be accessible. And I think, our city, all of you that are familiar with West Hollywood, we push the envelope. We are the creative city. We don't see barriers. But one of the things that helps with that is that even when we developed this whole idea of having these consumption lounges, is that a lot of cities are sitting on the sidelines waiting to see what's going to happen, and we're going to prove that the sky isn't going to fall. But I think it's important for these other cities that are sitting on the sidelines wondering, what does this all mean for our city? Is that one of the things that we really wanted to do as part of our ordinance and our process in West Hollywood was to really serve to inspire other cities and just the people in the industry to dispel the myth that cannabis is something undesirable, shady, that we don't want in our city. And that's why when we were talking to prospective businesses, we wanted people to come to the city with some really innovative and creative concepts, whether it's a consumption lounge or a health spa or something that incorporates this kind of lifestyle. Because I think it's as we get to see that throughout more cities that it'll truly become more of that mainstream. I mean, I always feel like, this is what, the end of prohibition must have felt like in this country back then, that, some cities, some businesses were taking a chance, right? And they were willing to be the pioneers out there in front of it. And for us in our city, I mean, it's just been really important. And, I spend a lot of time talking to other cities and, even with, people in the industry, so that if there's anything that we as a city can do to educate other cities and really put their concerns at ease so that they know that this is something that can be a positive, welcome addition to a city, that that we begin to move in that direction. And I say, listen, if Boehner, who was probably the most conservative person in Washington, can work for a cannabis company, I say there's hope.
There is.
So you just want to hug her? Love you. Thank you.
Jackie, just as a quick follow-up, did you look at any cities nationally or internationally as y'all were beginning to make these plans? And what cities do you find contacting you right now?
Well, when we began drafting, considering an ordinance, we actually started with a study session where we invited people from Colorado and from Washington to share their experiences. I mean, we're not experts on cannabis, so we wanted to hear from, the practical experience that these cities went through. And, it's a learning curve. I mean, you can never develop an ordinance right off the bat that it's perfect. And as you know, look, even the state of California's regulations are not finalized. And I think it's, this dialogue and these kinds of interactions where we can learn from one another that are really critical. And we had a lot of open meetings where we invited people from the cannabis industry and from advocacy groups to really share and help us craft an ordinance that was responsible, that really incorporated the elements that were, critical to have a solid regulatory framework in our city. So I say that's really, really important because especially, in local government, this is not what we do, and we needed to hear from everyone so that we would consider. And that's how, the whole idea for these consumption lounges came out of these discussions, and the whole concept of, social justice and equity, that if you live, right now, for example, if you live in a city where, you're renting an apartment and your landlord doesn't allow smoking in your apartment, you can't legally consume cannabis. You can't consume it where you purchase it. You can't go to a park. You can't be out from, 25 feet from a building. So where do you go to legally and safely consume the product? And
Grass-fed events.
Well, actually, that's not.
And that's part of
only now
that's
because
part of the need that we try to basically treat, because there are many people that, in a way, are still in a green closet when it comes to social consumption.
Right.
There is no way, no place to consume it publicly, and as you mentioned, it's a big challenge for all of the consumers, basically, especially if they want to meet like-minded people, and instead of having a drink with them, having an edible or a cannabis drink with them. So yeah, it's a big problem, and thank you for solving it for us.
Well, that's our intent. But so that was a really important aspect of it. And like you said, I mean, just like we all, are okay and accept people going out to happy hour and consuming, a cocktail at the end of the day, then our hope is that it gets to that point, and that, as we begin to see more of these business concepts take root and, open in these cities, that it begins to open this up to, the possibility that people will not be afraid, that they will see this as a positive thing in their lives, especially, when it comes to a healthy lifestyle and all of the, positive medicinal and wonderful effects. I mean, that's how, in one of those public meetings that we held, and I didn't know CBD from THC when we started doing this, and I asked the group, you know what, all I want to know is, does anybody here have anything for plantar fasciitis? And somebody raised the hand and said, we do, and that's how I've met Rob, and that's how I've been using their product. I mean, and that's how you learn.
So I'd actually like to jump in for a second and take issue with your comment about smoking. So here's my problem with that point of view. I know I sound like a broken record, but I have a real problem with people talking about cannabis and not talking about the social equity piece. And so I will bring that up, and I will beat you over the head with that for the rest of my life. And I think it's really important. And so my problem with having this sort of what I would call a very antiquated and reductive sort of view of what consuming cannabis should and ought to look like is that we have a history whereby people of color have been consuming cannabis and going to jail and having their families torn apart, and that the stigma around smoking is impossible to separate from smoking, because that's how it started in a lot of ways, and that is the image of cannabis that we all know. And so I believe that, yeah, smoking is not the best way to do it, for sure. But I love smoking weed. I smoke a lot of weed. And Don't tell anyone that because I'm a Canadian.
Don't cross the border again.
Yeah, right. And it is my belief that we need to think about cannabis in the most holistic of ways. We need to make room for people to consume cannabis any way they choose. We need to normalize it. If you smoke a bong, if you hit the dab, if you do whatever you do, and until we do that, until we make people feel comfortable consuming cannabis any which way they want, we are not going to make a difference. And that is my problem. I don't have a problem with you hosting events where there's no smoking, but for you to say that smoking is a problem is my problem.
No worries, and I can answer that. And I respect that for sure. As I mentioned, I'm an ex-smoker, and I'm talking from my own perspective, of course. I'm also a marathon runner. And since we're talking about wellness and health, I think the smoke-free environment is definitely part of, the fact that I used to smoke and I ran slower, and now I don't smoke and I run faster, and I'm a healthier human being. With that said, we are also trying to change, to break the stigma, and I understand the stoner stigma and the smoking around it, but we strive to make cannabis consumption akin to wine tasting, rather than doing shots at the bar. So if you look at alcohol, yeah, you can get blasted or get drunk, and that would be your mission, or you can have a very unique and sophisticated wine tasting. So we're trying to bring the more sophisticated approach without judging smoking or any other consumer. Obviously, there is a stigma. We need to treat it. I think that's why we all call it cannabis and not marijuana, because we know that marijuana has many bad connotations in it. But I think it's not very related to what you said. I still believe in fighting this stigma. On the other hand, I want to change it by, bringing science to the table. And if science says that vaping and edibles are better for you, and we're in 2018, why not do something that is better for your body, especially if you want to treat your body, and we're talking about wellness here. So if you want to treat your body the right way, we believe that a smoke-free environment is better. Nonetheless, no judgment. I still smoke a joint once in a while. I like to share a joint with friends. And again, I'm an ex-smoker, so that's a change that I personally had in my life.
But for me, it's the prescriptive nature of that messaging. It's like, why don't you just say, here's the information, I know you're a smart person, and you make the decision, instead of like, smoking is not sophisticated. No, not at all. Actually, we decided to do a smoke-free event, just to clarify, because most or all of the indoors venues in California prohibit smoking. So if we want to do a consumption event indoors, we have to allow edibles. We have to allow vaping. Or
come to West Hollywood.
Exactly, or come to West Hollywood. And I will talk about why vaping is still a better alternative. But yeah, definitely smoking is part of the heritage. I'm not taking it away. But you will see that in 10 or 15 years, smokers won't be the majority anymore. Now they are. In probably 15 or 20 years, they won't be.
I don't disagree with that.
I want to continue this conversation. Rob, did you have something to add here?
Yeah, I wasn't going to chime in, but...
I want you to.
when you say there's scientific evidence that vaping is healthier than smoking, that's an untrue statement. So there are two issues here. One is that there's not enough regulation and there's not enough research, and that's because we're in this giant transition from an illegal market to a legal market. So it is illegal, generally speaking, to study cannabis. And so there aren't enough studies to know whether...
Not in Israel. In Israel, they do study cannabis and they also study vaping. And I know that in the US, it's almost impossible. I agree.
The science doesn't exist.
I'll just tell you, I do not believe there's conclusive evidence of one or the other, and it has not been adequately studied, and it has not been adequately studied in Israel. So I have a difference of opinion.
But it's been studied that smoking is still more harmful than vaping. I do agree that vaping can be harmful.
It all has to do with what is in the... If you want to get into the science, so I'm a chemist, so... If there are impurities and you are smoking them, it's also very important to distinguish between tobacco smoke and cannabis smoke, because tobacco smoke has nicotine and cannabis smoke does not. So most of the detrimental aspects of smoking come from tobacco and nicotine. So smoking cannabis is much more healthful than smoking nicotine.
Agreed.
But if your cannabis has, butanol in it. It turns it into cyanide when it's ignited.
You don't want to vape it or smoke it.
Okay.
Same way.
But if you have propylene glycol or other impurities in the vaping, it's worse than smoking.
I believe. I agree. That's why we use different.
It's just not true to say in a blanket statement that vaping is more healthful than smoking. There's a lot more research that needs to be done and more regulations that needed, because if you vape a chemical, it could be toxic.
Right.
And I'm just saying, and we don't make any products that you smoke or vape. And I do smoke cannabis all the time, and I love it as well. Yeah. And you know, I see the doctor regularly. I'm concerned about my health. I'm convinced that smoking cannabis, if it's organic, if it's clean, if it's free from pesticides, is actually quite helpful.
Okay.
It is. It is.
Aaron, I know you've got
just
something to
chime
say
in.
here.
Our ancestors and our natives used to use smoke to clean impurities. And like if you have a red eye, they will blow smoke in your eye to like help you clean, or your ear. So there is some healthy benefits to smoking it.
I'm just curious, what do you tell your clients when they go, oh, Aaron, should I vape or should I smoke?
I tell them to do a tincture first, but if they feel like just consuming, do it however you feel like it, and then invite me.
I would love to continue this discussion because I think it gets, your social equity comment is very valid. And I believe there's an economic consideration to the smoke versus vape controversy or discussion, if you will, that, you know, I'm really open, so yeah, sure, yeah. Of course not. Who first you got to introduce yourself.
Hi, you guys are all awesome. Thank you so much for the work you're doing. My name is Sarah Melson, and I am Yoga Rejuvenation is my website. I'm a yogi and a very early adopter of yoga and cannabis-enhanced yoga. That's my practice. I was late to the conversation. I apologize, I came in late, but I was fortunate enough to come in here and catch the tail end of what's been with the smoke versus edibles discussion. And I just have a lot of personal experience with how it's affected my body. It's interesting because I was a smoker, as in cigarettes, had not found yoga yet, was in college, totally thought it was cool to smoke cigarettes. You know, like a lot of us did, had been really sheltered, so my first experience with weed was like mind-blowing in college, and then I was total wake and bake with like, you know, bong, joints, all of the above, all. Okay, to wrap it up.
We all probably have had a similar experience. I'm curious as to.
So I'm now a lot older. Yes, I do.
Smoke versus vape.
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. Sorry, what is your name?
Dan.
Dan, okay. It's interesting. I came in right when Dan was speaking about the whole edibles thing. I had to make the transition from smoking to edibles when my yoga practice started getting more serious. So just from a yoga perspective, I will say that and I totally respect like the sacrament of smoking, and even just yesterday I shared a joint because it was a special occasion with the circle of the panel, the girls, the women in cannabis. So we all just shared a joint afterwards. It was amazing. But like that's rare for me because now for like for the past, I would say like 15 years, I have been doing edibles only, and I have it down to a science where like I bake it into things, I know my dosage, I know what works for my practice. But I will say for my breath, like regardless of the effects and the content of the smoke, the action of smoking anything does just constrict the lungs, the capillaries in the lungs. And so if you're trying to get more oxygen into your lungs, which is really the goal of prana, which is life force, then edibles, for me at least, has been the way to go. And no judgment, no judgment. Yeah, no judgment. Just weighing in, kind of like what Dan was saying in terms of like overall physical health, you know? Yep. But I find edibles to be magical for yoga, for sure. Yeah.
Awesome.
All right, thanks.
And your panel was good yesterday.
I'm doing an event with Cannabis and Yoga in Ohio on November 11th.
Wonderful. Thank you. You don't have to leave. Okay. I'm going to change the subject here. there are, you each have your current consumer base. And I'd like to hear about who your current consumers are. And then, more importantly, who's your desired consumer and how are you planning on reaching them? And I'll ask, Rob, I'd ask you to start with this one, please, sir.
Our number one consumer are people who are looking for some kind of pain relief, physical pain relief. And our second largest consumer are people who are looking to manage anxiety. And our third largest consumer group are people who are looking for like migraine relief and sleep aid.
For me, everyone, right? But of course, in my practice, I seek and I ask for the clients that present the most problems, right? Because I really want to explore my practice. So the people that are injured, recovering. So by infusing or adding CBD to my practice just takes it to level 10. So I just gotta say everyone, because everyone needs CBDs and everyone needs a massage.
So how everyone does? Just how do you expand that vision in the community of massage therapists?
Oh, okay. Well, I post on social media. I give information. My wife is very knowledgeable because she creates these wonderful products. And so I do that by teaching other massage therapists to add it to their practice or any type of healer. And I think by sharing makes a big impact because I can't reach everyone. And so by incorporating the like-minded people, it just creates more love, right?
Awesome.
In healing.
Dan.
So yeah, it's kind of hard to define our average guest because the scale is just pretty wide. When it comes to our Marijuana Madness events, we see soccer moms, we see lawyers, business individuals, non-cannabis industry individuals. Inner space is more millennials, but I would say that we are trying to get more mainstream crowd rather than cannabis crowd. So crowd that won't be comfortable doing dabs at the cannabis cup because it's too overwhelming because of this hot box environment that I mentioned, and are looking to meet like-minded people that like cannabis and like to consume cannabis in the most sophisticated ways that we believe are sophisticated, whether it's through cannabis cocktails or vaporizers or edibles. We work with a few different chefs that cater different types of cuisines. So yeah, we have basically all colors and almost all ages. I would say 25 to 60 is an average, if it makes sense.
Yeah, I think it's probably a pretty similar demographic for Miss Grass. We are speaking to what we call a modern woman consumer generally, but we're not exclusive as far as that goes. So we really target more of a psychographic than a demographic. So, what is she interested in? What is she focused on? What is she concerned about? And most of the time, that's a woman focused on wellness and self-care and trying to take back that sort of power. And then in terms of age, it would be also roughly 25 to 60, which is a huge range, which is why we talk about a psychographic rather than a demographic. And then like Rob, people are coming to Miss Grass for CBD products for anxiety, sleep, and pain predominantly.
I'm going to ask I want to take another perspective on the smoke versus vape, and I'm going to start with you, Dan, only because it applies to your business and with food catering and infused food. A lot of discussion right now on the health, the wellness component of either mixing cannabis with alcohol and or wine and beer, or infusing wine and or beer or other alcohol with cannabis. I'd like to hear the panel's opinion on this, because I think, especially when you talk millennials and you start looking at, Jackie, in your interest, tourists coming to the city of West Hollywood, this is a potential pitfall from gaining the public acceptance of cannabis as it gets mixed into alcohol, wine, and beer. Thoughts?
Yeah, so first, it is a problematic issue right now because the regulations don't allow you to consume cannabis and alcohol together unless it's in a private setting. So yeah, in a private setting, you can serve both alcohol and cannabis. Nonetheless, it might be a little bit risky because maybe I or Anna or the rest of the guys here are responsible when it comes to consumption, but some are not responsible. And some people that consume too much alcohol with too much cannabis could be a disaster. Could be a recipe to disaster and can only damage the cannabis stigma in general. And I think it is problematic. Nonetheless, I love wine, I love cannabis, I know how to consume it responsibly. I think the point would be how to educate people not to consume only to get blasted, but to use it to enhance an experience. Whether you drink wine, because it's rooted in our society to hold a glass in your hand, or use cannabis to elevate your immersive tech experience, or elevate your live music experience, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
Again, I think it's inevitable to mix them, especially in a private setting. People like to drink, people like to use cannabis, and some people like to mix, so we cannot change that.
I think the challenge with this is what Rob alluded to earlier. I think the fact that cannabis continues to be a Schedule I drug has made it difficult, if not impossible, to really do research, to really understand and establish standards for what constitutes being under the influence. And I think we're familiar in our society with what level of alcohol is in your blood to indicate that you are intoxicated and under the or impaired. We don't have those standards for cannabis, and I think that's part of the challenge with, when you implement these policies at a, whether it's the state or local level, that we just don't have enough data to really understand what really is happening. I mean, we're going to begin to see this a lot with law enforcement.
Yeah.
The only thing that law enforcement can do right now is pull someone over that they believe is impaired. Well, as we all know, that's an extremely subjective standard. It's not like, alcohol. So it's something that we are all having to grapple with. And I think, again, I think the only way that we will eventually get to, this point where we are all comfortable with this is really working to get cannabis off that Schedule I. And because then that's when everything will, we will, federal funding will be allowed, or even private funding for research, and to really educate the public and to really understand. And even if people experiment, that there will still be guidelines that people can follow. So I think ultimately that's where we all need to go.
Anyone have anything else to add before I open up questions real quick?
I would second what Dan and Jackie said. As an industry, with government, we have one chance to get this right. And I'll just applaud Jackie and West Hollywood for the work they're doing. It really is extraordinary.
We all agree with that.
So, personally, I think, alcohol is a toxin. You can overdose from alcohol. People get drunk and there are car accidents all the time. The police will tell you that they never get called to a house with a guy smoking a joint and beating up his wife. It doesn't happen. It happens every day with alcohol. So, the whole legalization movement of cannabis was based on one premise: Just one. It doesn't make sense to have alcohol and tobacco be legal and have cannabis be illegal. That was the whole wedge for legalization. If you're going to make alcohol and tobacco illegal, it's fine to continue prohibition of cannabis, but it makes no sense. Cannabis is a safer substance. So it's potentially dangerous to mix the two from a public policy perspective and from making sure that this industry comes into full form.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am. Right here. Yeah.
I come from a digital content industry, and so I know there's a lot of regulations around integrating the product of cannabis in online content and television and media. How have you guys understood that regulatory framework for when you're talking about cannabis in a digital context and with content and television and series? How is it that we can navigate that better with sort of maybe the advantages of integrated marketing, but also not crossing the regulatory lines that exist?
You want to take that?
I'll take that. So yeah, Miss Grass is a content platform and a marketplace. So we call it a contextual commerce business, which is not dissimilar to the Goop business, if any of you are familiar with that. So it's curated marketplace, content drives to commerce in certain instances, not all instances. Obviously, we have a big educational mandate as well. But yes, it's very astute of you to observe that. I came from another cannabis brand before I started Miss Grass called Dosist. I was brought on as their head of content. Are you at Dosist? Oh, is that you? Oh my God, I can't even see you. Hi, woman. So
small industry.
Yeah. So we're not there anymore. But what I learned at Dosist and what I've brought with me at Miss Grass is that there are, just like everything in cannabis, conflicting regulations whereby we, as business operators, either on the consumer packaged goods side, as in the case of Lord Jones, or in Dan's case, experiential, or my case, where it's a marketplace and content, where we are constantly having to pivot, where it's changing every single day. And so from a content standpoint, let's just say Lord Jones were to sell on Miss Grass. Part of how we would build in that partnership is there would be content built around Lord Jones. So when, let's say I'm going to write a story about Lord Jones, about how great the product is, blah, 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 then if I want that product to get eyes on it, I have to put money behind it on paid channels. So Facebook, Instagram, whatever the case. That is an absolutely necessary thing to do in order to get eyes in this industry. It's a pay-to-play model, period. So what we have to do as cannabis brands is we need to find a way around that. And so a lot of the times that looks like partnerships, strategic partnerships with platforms that have built-in audiences. So how do we leverage that? How do we broker syndication deals? Other times it looks like ad buys where we can do it, and podcasts are a great place for that. But generally, like, there is no roadmap. There is no clear path forward. It's constantly changing, and it's a matter of like what your appetite is for risk.
And I will say, from a regulatory standpoint, the majority of the regulations deal with what you would consider to be traditional media. When you can, when you can buy TV time, because you can, for example, buy ads for marijuana brands, but they follow basically the same regulations as alcohol advertising. And it's most of your outreach techniques are not even addressed by the regulations at this point in time.
So is OTT not regulated for advertising cannabis? Linear broadcasting?
No, it is regulated.
Yeah. When you say, because television now, the FCC requirements and cover both broadcast, cable, and OTT. Yeah. I would love to take more questions. I've got a wave that it's 3 o'clock and there's another panel coming in here. I had a list of questions I didn't get to. What a great panel. Oh my God. Awesome. I thank you guys and thank you for attending. Oh, sure.